Thank you, Jessamine. Hello, everyone. And I am very pleased to be here. Before I start, we have a liar in the room. Maybe I'll do that again because that was pretty rubbish. We have a liar in the room. Much better, much better. Now, friends, earlier you might remember that Jessamine asked, does anyone have children? Friends, my father is in the room. My father did not answer yes. And what's more, friends, you know, one of the things that I think is particularly strange about this, you see, my father actually came to my first Bright Club set, right? He was there and he sat down beside one of my very best friends, longtime best friends, and said, Tara, I don't understand. He's like, she's my least funny child. He has 5 children. That means that I'm not the first, you know, in the list. I'm not the second, I'm not the third. I am the 5th least funny child. Which makes me the least funny Murray, right? So I apologise to Bright Club tonight for bringing you the least funny Murray, but this is what you're stuck with, so I'm sorry, deal with it. But, you know, the thing that I think was interesting was the concept of maybe surprise. Because to me, you know, this was a surprising revelation. I didn't know I was the least funny child. But it's a concept that builds in science all the time. Surprise is something that appears in places that you never expect. So, in a sense, there's a lot of things that I've done that I thought were quite surprising, right? And as a sort of example, like one of the things that you don't expect you'll be doing when you start doing science, you have these ideas, you say, okay, I'm going to try and explain crystals. And I'm going to do this in a way that's genius. I'm going to do this with kilograms of mini marshmallows, chocolate, Maltesers and Toblerone. Other chocolates available. Now, the thing to note about this, and maybe you haven't clocked this yet, if you're going to work with thousands and thousands of marshmallows, well, they're actually 40 to 60% air. So that means they're going to cover your feckin' desk to the point where you can't see anyone else. And it also means that people will keep coming to your room to steal your chocolate supplies, right? Which are academic supplies, which... Anyway, the thing, though, that you maybe don't even think about further is you might be like, oh, hang on a second. Claire, you worked in a lab, which is what you should be asking. Health and safety is very important. And I would like to say I'm not a complete heathen. I did not keep these supplies in the lab. I kept them in my office, which was clearly a much safer place, depending on how many people decided to eat chocolate that day. But turns out this was quite a genius idea, right? People seem to really love the concept of, you know, playing with chocolate. Even though the parents would end up with like super sticky fingers, everyone would have a mess, it was all fine because it's science and that makes everything better, right? So we decided success is a good thing. Let's go bigger, let's go better. We decided we would go and do more work with chocolate. I think, yeah, thank you. Thank you, person who actually bothered. Thank you very much. Chocolate it definitely deserves an ooh, because I don't know how many people realise chocolate is a tricky beast, okay? There's reasons that people spend their whole life just working with chocolate. And one of the main reasons for this, and the reason that I think it's really interesting, is did you know that chocolate actually has, well, cocoa butter specifically, has 6 different forms, right? At least 6, there's possibly more, but we know 6 for sure. So what that means is that when you look and think about chocolate, you may be thinking about different forms of chocolate. So how many of you have gotten really excited, like a small child at Christmas, when you discover there's an Easter egg or a chocolate bar sitting down the back? Show of hands. Yes, good. That's exactly what I would expect. I expect to see that much hands. Now, and how many of you were subsequently quite disappointed when you bit into the chocolate and it was crumbly or soft and looked really dull and disappointing? Yeah, it happens. It should have happened to everyone at this point if you're a connoisseur of chocolate. So But the reason that happens is actually because of cocoa butter, right? And there's other reasons as well, but cocoa butter is one of the major ones. Because actually the molecules of cocoa butter, they rearrange themselves, right? And they rearrange themselves, and this is called polymorphs, right? Because there's 6 different polymorphs, 6 different ways the cocoa butter can be rearranged inside this chocolate. And the thing that happens is that it basically goes from magic number 5. 5 is the one that you really should be interested in, because 5 is gorgeous. 5 is silky, smooth. Yeah, sexy voices here. I'm loving this. That's exactly what 5 is. 5 is beautiful. 6 is a load of shite. So this is the problem, right? And this is actually, it turns out, a rather excellent science experiment to do with students all over the place. So, primary school, secondary school, doesn't matter. It's an amazing exercise in torture. Because what you do is you sit these small children down and you say, take a seat, children, and I would like you to look at these 2 squares of chocolate. So the looking process, is not just a case of, oh yeah, that's grand. You've got to really get them to study. So you say, look closely at the chocolate. Observe the chocolate. Does it look special? Do they look different? And so at this stage, you can already see this twitching going on. They're suspicious and they really want to get the chocolate in their mouth. They don't really care about anything else. So then you kind of make matters worse. And this is actually entirely unnecessary. It's just because it's funny. You then say, smell the chocolate, right? So they go down and they're smelling the chocolate and they're like, okay, what now? And so you say, okay, now we're going to take half a bite of square A. And you're going to leave it on your tongue and let it melt. Now this is actually torture because the children have to sit there with the half a square in their mouth and not eat it, which is something unknown to them. They've never had to do with this before. And you can see the death glares. It's like a wave coming towards you. And then eventually you say, okay, now you can eat it and go, grand. And then you do the same again with square number 2, right? And there is some science here. I'm not just doing this because it's fun, or maybe I am. But anyway, it's because the chocolate will taste different because of the different polymorphs. That's what I'm trying to get them to think about and to understand. But the very convenient thing and the rather genius thing about the design of this concept is that there's still 2 half squares left, which means the children can eat the 2 half squares while you escape out the back door and never come back. So it's something that I think was quite a clever concept in terms of how we designed this. Now, when I was talking about surprise earlier, it was clearly a surprise to me to be doing things like this in my scientific career. Like, I never expected to be torturing children. That was not what I signed up for originally. But, there's been other things that I've done. So I, designed board games. I've walked through London like Gandalf with a giant stick, basically, in the name of science, fully in the name of science. I've also done, I've had inquiries from science funding asking why I was ordering acupuncture needles and whether they were for personal use. They were not. They were for full science. But I think, when I think about some of these things, I actually realise that some of them are my own fault. Sometimes I put myself in a situation where I actually have to, I create problems for myself. And I think one of the best illustrations for this is actually coming back to crystals that we were speaking about earlier, that Tony mentioned. So he was talking about order, right? So crystals like order. That's the really, really important thing. And one of the things that if you think about crystals, and you think about order, I'm like, how can I demonstrate that? How can I make a nice big display so people actually understand what's happening inside the crystal? And the answer was, of course, that I would basically use balls, right? Which there are scientists in the room. They might decide to fight me on this. That's okay. We'll go out the back later on. But balls were an acceptable situation under the circumstances. And so what I did was I basically ordered a giant box, right? A transparent box, very beautiful, very, very nice box. And I filled it with footballs. And this sounds great, except you'll note that I said footballs, balls, right? 8 footballs to be precise. Well, actually 9, because I had one in the center, which meant that I basically had to carry a box like this. And I had to take it to an event, which involved a bus, a tube, a train, another tube, go to my cousin's house, stay the night, get on the tube again, another tube, another train, another bus, and then in a car. They got the front seat, I did not. And this is the sort of things that you go through when you're thinking about scientific careers and the illusion of science. This is not something you would ever thought that you would have been doing when you qualified in your science career. And I think, as I might have hinted already, I think quite a lot of my career has seemed to involve these rather unusual moments, many of which are on my making. But yeah, I think on consideration, little Claire would never have imagined that she would have been basically Neil Buchanan from Art Attack, Gandalf, and also the evil stepmother all in the same role, but there you go. I've been the least funny Murray. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.